What's happening, guys? Jonny Pickleball here, inside the lines. Another great match for you on this episode. We're going to have the quarterfinals of the PPA Hyundai Masters in Palm Springs Mission Hills Country Club, powered by Invited. That matchup's going to be Thomas Wilson, Vivienne David, taking on Riley Newman and Jackie Kawamoto. And of course, as we go through this match, we're going to be looking for things. We're going to be highlighting different aspects of it. And some of those things being good, some of them not being so good. And we'll start first with Thomas and Vivienne. So Vivienne David being extremely aggressive throughout this entire match. Not something that she's always done consistently, but in this match, you're going to see a lot of examples of her being aggressive. Also, Thomas Wilson's forehand. I mean, my goodness. It's a cannon, probably one of the best on the tour, and we're going to be showing how that was extremely effective in this matchup. Vivienne and Thomas both were looking to press and be on offense early, and you're going to see great examples of that, especially in game one, and how they were able to set the tone throughout the entirety of that game. Okay, and then game 2 and 3, there were some adjustments that needed to be made, and they were able to do that. But mostly you're going to see how they were able to press as a duo. And so on the other end, Jackie Kawamoto and Riley Newman, some of their strengths and weaknesses that we saw throughout this, the Kawamoto lob, the good, the bad, and the ugly in that. So we're going to have some examples of how it worked and how it didn't. Okay. Also, some of the making adjustments that they were able to do, switching sides, is something that Newman and Kawamoto were able to kind of do when they fell behind early in these matches or in these games. Okay. Also, Riley Newman owning the kitchen, being big up there, trying to create pressure for Newman or for Wilson and David, as well as they were trying to stay in the dink. That was one big thing that they weren't able to do all the time, but probably should have. However, keep in mind, as we go through inside the lines, I have never missed a shot from this chair. I am completely undefeated from this area. So much easier said than done. Very difficult to do some of this stuff on the court. As we all know, they make it look very easy. And so that is why they are professionals and amazing at what they do. So let's get started. We have a lot to go through. Game 1 starts now. All right, so first point that we're going to get into is the very first point. Wilson and David coming out firing. Vivienne David setting the tone for the entire first game right in the first point. So let's go ahead and roll it. You'll see what I mean as they get started here. Kawamoto to serve. Vivienne able to come in. Thomas stepping in there with the forehand. And you'll see Kawamoto here going back and forth. Little dink battle to start, but then there's Vivienne David pulling trigger. She's able to go ahead and just step in there, cover that middle, and Thomas Wilson was respecting down the line on Kawamoto. Granted, it's the first point, so there's always a little bit of feeling out here at the beginning. So let's go ahead and jump out to the next point, and we'll see what's next. All right, so in this next point, we're already at 3-0, David and Wilson, as we said, coming out firing, so really pressing early here. So Kawamoto and Riley trying to think of something else to do. We're going to watch Kawamoto throw up a lob. This one's going to be one of the good ones, so let's go ahead and check it out. You'll see Jackie Kawamoto going ahead and serving. Riley's going to drop to the forehand of Thomas Wilson, which we're going to talk about later, as he does that probably a little too much. And right there, we're going to go ahead and pause. And what you're going to see after Kawamoto gets stretched out a little wide, she actually lobs over the left shoulder of Vivienne David. Thomas Wilson was actually covering the line, and so he wasn't able to come over there and help Vivienne. So she had to go ahead and kind of have this awkward backhand overhead, which was great. And Riley Newman, being the experienced veteran that he is, slid over to cover that middle, knowing that Vivienne David wouldn't have the ability to put that ball down the line. And so he just shrank the court and then put away an easy Riley Newman pancake forehand volley right down the center, and they get the point. So good playing on behalf of Riley and Jackie to try to switch it up here early in game 1 after finding themselves down in a 3-0 hole. Let's go ahead and get on to the next clip. Here we go. Okay, so at this point in game 1, we are at 7-1 in favor of Wilson and David. So in Newman and Kawamoto's mind, they have to do something. Something has to change here. And what that's going to be is Riley Newman is actually going to stay off of the left. He's going to stay to the right. They're not going to switch here. We're going to go ahead and roll it, and he's going to get some opportunities. And really, this is just to give David and Wilson, who are dominating right now, just a different look. Sometimes it's a good idea when you're playing the opponents, if they're making a big run, we just have to change something up, even if it's not conventional. And so Riley Newman able to get the around the post, kind of insert himself into the middle of the court here to own that kitchen line and really just nail Thomas Wilson in the chest when it's all said and done. But, you know, great point, and at least something positive out of this so far after Vivienne, David, and Thomas Wilson, just like I said, came out on fire, really just pressing and creating all offensive opportunities. There's very minimal dinking so far. Be sure to keep in mind that now that they've had any kind of positive thing going on for Newman and Kawamoto, we can start to look at the comeback ahead. So here we go. The comeback's coming. Let's get started. All right, so in this point, we've jumped ahead here in game one. There is a game point already that Vivienne and Thomas Wilson have already had. They are up 10-6 now, but Kawamoto and Newman are able to try to just start to chip away slowly but surely. And how have they been able to do it? You're going to see in this point, they keep dinks down. So earlier on in the game, they started actually, Riley Newman, for some odd reason, just kept dropping over to the Thomas Wilson forehand. His third shot drop was just going to Thomas Wilson and his forehand almost every single time. He was probably trying to get it to the backhand side, but Thomas, with such athleticism, was able to move around that and keep his forehand creating pressure on Kawamoto and Newman so they couldn't even come in and dictate pace. And so now in this game, the turning point is that they're starting to switch it up. Riley Newman begins to drop the third shot to Vivienne David, and then that at least gives them a chance to move forward. Once that happens, they're able to keep their dinks down until getting their opportunity for Jackie Kawamoto to get a good lob in this time. And we'll check it out now. So let's go ahead and see what we got. But you'll notice after switching it up here, Riley Newman's going to have his serve. And now he's going to drop to Vivienne, allowing him and Jackie the ability to move forward. And then they can get into dinking, which is exactly what they want to do. They want to dictate pace to create. One of their strengths is consistency. And so they want to make sure that they don't have to go through a firefight every single time. And they can kind of keep the ball down and keep it at bay. And you'll notice they're just going to wait for their opportunity. Jackie Kawamoto moving the ball back and forth, moving the players around. There's the lob. And a great finish there by Riley Newman and Jackie Kawamoto as they make their comeback. A lot of that is just by them being able to dictate pace, whereas in the beginning part of game one, Thomas Wilson and Vivienne David were just pressing. And now that they have to go to the style of Newman and Kawamoto, things are beginning to turn. So let's continue on. All right, so here we are, down to the wire in game one. Newman and Kawamoto made their adjustments. And one of those is you're going to see Newman was able to start dropping to Vivienne David versus going to the forehand of Thomas Wilson. Now, in this point, this first point that we're going to go over, Thomas Wilson does get involved a lot, but the pressure, the initial pressure of Kawamoto and Riley Newman, plus a net cord, they did get one of those. They were due for one of those because in the first game, Wilson and David had their fair share. So with a little bit of luck of that net cord on this one, you're going to see, but it's the adjustment, the initial adjustment to have the third shot drop go to Vivienne versus the forehand of Thomas Wilson. That at least gives them a little bit more hope to getting in. Let's check it out. So the serve from Riley. There's the drop to Vivienne. Now, she's able to at least push to Kawamoto. Thomas is able to get in there, but there's the initial pressure coming up. And the much needed net cord on the last one. So they did get that one, a little fist pump there from Riley Newman. We're going to go right into the next point as they get the lead up at 14-13. And a little chat there between Thomas and Vivienne. But we'll see if they can make an adjustment. We already know what ends up happening in this game. But there was a great adjustments by Riley Newman and Kawamoto, as it's a little bit overly aggressive there on the forehand from Vivienne, as she's been going at Newman, but decided to change her mind probably at that last minute to go at Kawamoto, who was still a little further back and felt the pressure of Riley Newman up front. So great adjustments in that first game, 15-13, going to Newman and Kawamoto. But let's get to game two because Wilson and David make some adjustments early on in that second game. Here we go. Okay, so early on here in game two, some of the things that were working for Kawamoto and Newman in their comeback they've kind of gone backwards in. So now Riley Newman is automatically going back to dropping to the forehand of Thomas Wilson, even if he's trying to get to the backhand. Like I said before, Thomas's athleticism is giving him the ability to run around that and then have the forehand to create pressure on the team that's back, which is Newman and Kawamoto, so they don't have the ability to even come in or create any pressure. So you're going to see it here, and you're going to see that Thomas Wilson and Vivienne now going back to what was working for them in game one, which is applying pressure as much as possible and playing very fast and as a duo. Let's check it out. So you'll see the serve by Newman, and then Thomas Wilson, deep return, very nice. There's the drop to the Wilson forehand, and now Vivienne David even able to get involved with her forehand. They're not even able to come in at all and create any pressure or even come into that transition zone. So they have to stay back. They have to try to play defense. That's going to be a tall order against two players in David and Wilson that have massive forehands. And so obviously this is going to be the theme here in game two of David and Wilson kind of going back to what was working for them in game one early on. So let's get to the next point. Okay, so here we are in game two. We're at 3-2 now in favor of Kawamoto and Newman. So this game going neck and neck so far. So what we're going to start seeing, especially in this one, is again, like we talked about earlier, was Wilson and David getting back to what was working for them in getting aggressive. And they were fortunate enough. We talked about the Kawamoto lob, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's go ahead and roll it see where we get. There's a serve from Vivienne. Thomas Wilson able to slide over, take the third, and now go ahead and come in. There's the Burt from Riley Newman. And an ill-advised lob from Kawamoto. I'll go ahead and pause that. Kawamoto did a great job. She was able to come over and cover, and for Thomas Wilson, who was flying around, well, obviously, for Riley Newman, who was flying around, did the Burt, jumped in front of her, jumped the kitchen. And now she had the whole court to figure out. She did a great job by actually slowing the ball down, gave Riley time to come back into the court. And then she went into dinking. That also gave him time to recover and kind of get back into things. One too many dinks in there, though, unfortunately, as she probably should have kept dinking and moved the ball around to give them an opportunity to win the point, as they do very well if they're dictating pace and continue dinking. That seemed to be their strength in this match. She decides to go ahead and lob, and this is not one of her finest lobs. I'm sure she would agree with me on this one, and probably the mindset should have been to go back to the dinking, as that is their bread and butter over everything else. But it didn't work out for her on that one. Some of her other lobs during the match did, and some of them didn't, but she kept trying. So all good. Let's check out the next point. Okay, so here we are at 6-4. David and Wilson starting to pull away slightly, but then something happens. At this point in the game, this is a massive turning point as they set the tone for the rest of the game by getting back to, again, what we had talked about earlier about them going forward and starting to press and be very aggressive. But now they're even going to do it by isolating Kawamoto and both of them shrinking the court in the process. You'll see Vivienne slide to her left slightly as she's on the right side currently. So let's go ahead and roll it and you'll see what I mean. So Thomas serves, Riley returns, and then you're going to start to see them move in together. Vivienne's pressing, already shrinking the court. So I'll go ahead and pause it. Thomas is straight ahead from Jackie Kawamoto. So Vivienne, if she comes in straight ahead towards the kitchen line, that leaves open the middle, which would stretch Thomas way too thin as he's trying to come up there. Not to say he couldn't handle it, but it just creates, it's not as effective. So as Thomas comes in, even behind Vivienne, she goes towards the middle, shrinks the court on Kawamoto. That would have to make a great angle dink under pressure, or is going to have to probably push it back to Thomas Wilson, which is going to expose Riley on the outside. So Riley's also trying to come in and pinch and try to get involved, but just unable to, as it happens so fast. But this is going to set the tone for the rest of this second game. And a great point by David and Wilson to kind of change that up and take advantage of that opportunity. So let's keep going. Let's see what we have next in game two. All right, so as we wind down game two, as we saw, Thomas Wilson, Vivienne David were pressing back and forth. Riley Newman and Jackie Kawamoto hung tough. They're experienced. Both of them have been playing for quite some time. They know how to just hang in there. That's what they were doing. It's amazing how they were able to stick around. This was like the tale of two halves of each game. You know, Thomas and Vivienne able to pull ahead, and then all of a sudden, here's Riley and Jackie Kawamoto right behind them. And all of a sudden, here we are in game two. We're at game point at 10-9 instead of being up. They were up a lot bigger earlier. So How they were able to do that was, again, that anytime it got down to the dinks and really grinding out points, Riley Newman and Jackie Kawamoto did very well. Thomas Wilson, Vivienne David, let's see what they can do here on game point as they are able to finish it, as Riley Newman has a little bit shorter return to the Thomas Wilson forehand, which, again, as we stated, one of the biggest forehands in our game currently, and takes advantage of that opportunity as well. And so they get game 2, Thomas Wilson, Vivienne David, which are going to force game 3, but definitely two different styles here. One being very consistent in Newman and Kawamoto and dinking and kind of grinded out kind of pace, and Vivienne David, Thomas Wilson, fast, fiery, and trying to come at you and press forward. So let's see what happens. Game 3 coming up. All right, so here we are in game 3. We're at 1-1 early on here. This is going to be a neck and neck game, you know, the battle of different styles that are going to be coming at each other. So in this one, this also is going to set the tone for Wilson and David of what they were doing all along. You're just going to see them attacking as a duo. This was something to watch for early on. A lot of what was happening, especially in game 1, also transferred into game 2. The adjustments were made by Newman and Kawamoto to try to slow the game down, and you're not going to see anything different here in game 3. So let's go ahead and roll it. 1-1, Thomas to serve. You're going to see Vivienne David and Thomas Wilson just attack press together, and there's the isolation again on Jackie Kawamoto. She's able to neutralize some, but Vivienne David being as aggressive as anyone has probably seen her, and playing very well in this match. So also helping out, obviously, is Thomas Wilson's forehand. That tends to help as well. So let's get to the next point here in game 3, as this one, like I said, went down to the wire. All right, so in one of the very next few points, we're still tied at 1 apiece. It kept going back and forth a little bit. Jackie Kawamoto is going to throw up another lob. Let's see how this one does. So let's go ahead and roll it. You're going to see she's going to get a little impatient during this. Probably because they had such a good job dinking. She's only made a few of those lobs, maybe 1 or 2 throughout this entire match. The rest have not gone their way, as she's just trying to get Thomas and Wilson and Vivienne David off that line. But as you can see right there, she just doesn't have the opportunity or the clean look to make that happen. And so it ends up in a bad result. Another bad lob opportunity there. Probably should have went back to the dinking, but easier said than done, as we always keep saying. So let's go ahead and keep going through game 3. All right, so here we are, 10-8, Wilson and David with match point opportunity. You're going to see everything that they've been doing from game 1 to game 2 to game 3, everything that got them success. And that's going to be high pressure, dictate pace, finish with a Wilson forehand. It was either going to be a Wilson forehand or a Vivienne David forehand to probably end this point. So here we go. Let's go ahead and roll it. Everything they did for the match right here. Good return by Riley Newman, but still going to Wilson. There's Vivienne closing, creating pressure. Again, going back at Riley. And now Thomas Wilson finishing with that forehand. They played very well, all 4 players. This was a fantastic match at the Hyundai Masters. The PPA doing it big per usual. And an awesome play from all 4 players. So I hope you enjoyed. Jonny Pickleball here. Inside the Lines. We'll always have some new episodes coming your way. So many matches to break down this year. Don't miss one. We'll see you soon.